Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to PMI Live. It is episode 114 with myself, Rich Seddon, partner and CEO of PMI. Nearly forgot which company we were in then, and my colleague, Anthony Richardson. I'll ask Anthony to introduce himself shortly, as he will be leading the session. As you will have gathered, today's title is Bottlenecks Blocking Your Progress, ? And how to achieve operational flow with Agile. Now, as regular attendees will know, our subjects for PMI Live and our topics that we cover come from our Voice of the Customer surveys. It is that everyone that's registered for the live session will receive one of those, and we're currently just scoping up the next 6 months schedule. The Voice of the Customer goes out to people that attend PMI Live and everyone that attends our training sessions around the world. So please do put your contributions in there. You direct where we go with this, and the topics are in your hands. If you are joining us in the live session, it's great to have you with us. We're going to be experimenting today with some live translation. We do it in our training courses, but not usually PMI Live. So we've got the language and speech enabled. So if you would like to use that functionality, there's a whole raft of languages available. Simply click the More button up at the top in Teams. Go to language and speech and you can show live captions. Anthony had me speaking German and French in the past half hour. So let's give that a whirl. And we'd love to hear your feedback on that as well, because we, as I say, we don't often use it in PMI Live. We've got an international audience with us. It's great to see so many different companies and countries represented. PMI Live as a live session, the value comes from your contributions. So we ask everyone to ask questions, share your observations, your thoughts. How's this resonating with you? Give us a feel for and some feedback. It's one of the joys of being able to do this session. And also, you've got an expert consultant in Anthony captive for the next hour. So why not take advantage of that and share your thoughts? And he looks delighted with me for making that offer to you all. So Anthony, would you like to introduce yourself? I know we've got lots of new participants today and some have not met you before.
Yeah, from lots of places by the looks of the chat as well. Thanks everyone for joining. Yeah, so my name's Anthony Richardson. I'm a senior consultant for PMI. I've spent the last decade plus in the change Lean Six Sigma transformation space. My background is slightly biased towards the technical in terms of data analysis, software development, but really through my change journey, I've worked on all kinds of things, you know, outsourcing projects, sales, financial services, all over the place, logistics and supply chain. So I've kind of seen these different principles and tools applied in a lot of places. Looking forward to talking about about that a bit today. In terms of what I've been working on recently as well, which is quite relevant, I've been working on two things. So the first has been developing a new apprenticeship standard, which we're looking forward to launching later this year, called Agile Business Analyst. So very similar to today's theme. That's been a really interesting journey. And as well as that, I've been developing our internal and external facing AI capabilities, which is incredibly interesting and beneficial.
You certainly have. Yeah, thanks for that, Anthony. On the subject of participation that I mentioned earlier on, if you are still joining us on one of the streaming services on YouTube, Facebook and LinkedIn, there's still time to register if you do want to participate and take advantage of us being here. Hop on over to pmi.co.uk/webinars. On the subject of pmi.co.uk, that's where you'll find our knowledge base, which has all the recordings of PMI live sessions. And as we're on episode 114 today, that means there's 113 available. They're filterable, searchable, and do have a look through them. They're all titled in terms of topic. Really useful piece of a resource that we make available, so you should do take advantage of it. And let us know with feedback as and when you've got any. So without further ado, Anthony, would you like to take us through what you're going to cover today?
Yeah, sure. So as in the title, we're interested today in this idea of bottlenecks in our organization. So we're going to logically begin by defining what we mean by bottlenecks. And really within that definition, we're going to try and split this into two different lenses, if you like. We're going to take an operational lens where we're looking at what's happening within the work itself, and how Agile can help us with that, or how agility. And in the same way, how could agility help us with a very specific type of bottleneck when it comes to our improvement and our organizational learning? So we're going to talk about both of those and then bring that together and think about the common threads and that need for a systematic approach in resolving these things. So hopefully that will be of use to our audience today.
That sounds great. And just to let you know, Anthony, we've actually also gone live, not only with closed captions translation, we've got live AI translation on our voices too. Given I can see mine is called Ava, I'm not sure what I sound like, folks. So look forward to seeing the recordings of this.
Yeah. Always interesting when I hear myself in German through an AI filter or some other language, and it's kind of my voice, but yeah, a very, very interesting experience. Okay, so today's content. So as I said, we're going to start by defining what we mean by a bottleneck. And I think without giving a formal definition, it's kind of one of those things of we all know it when we're in one, don't we? Or when we're dealing with one. Bottlenecks are something that we really do feel, particularly inside our organization. They have customer impact, yes, but what we're talking about really are these situations where, we have a process and the flow of work within that process specifically has been restricted or slowed down. And this is limiting the performance, the overall performance of the system. So these bottlenecks, they can be very short term, they can be longer term, they can last for a long time. They can be well known by the organization, and sometimes they go unnoticed, they go kind of lived with. But that's really what we're talking about. In terms of what causes these things, typically, we think about waste. Processes where we're maybe doing a lot of things in ways that could be better, and that kind of wasted time, that wasted potential for the process is manifesting itself as a bottleneck, an inability to deal with the work. But just in general, it's really this concept of overburden on the process, which is a concept that we think about a lot in the Lean Six Sigma methodology, as well as that unevenness and that variation in the process, maybe spikes in customer demand, different abilities, different capabilities between different resources within the team, meaning it's very unpredictable as to how well this process can deal with demand. So as an example, if we think about a hospital, there's a couple of ways you could come at this. If you're a hospital or a healthcare organization, you could have a bottleneck in something like triaging patients as a process, or discharging patients as a process, as part of your core value stream. But they can be just as pernicious and destructive, these bottlenecks, when they're affecting our enabling and support processes. So things like, your onboarding and your recruitment, is that a bottleneck to the organization? Is it stopping you from succeeding? So it's not just the value stream itself, it's really a bottleneck anywhere in the organization.
Excellent. Great definition around that, Anthony. Thanks.
But what I promised is that we'd look at this through a couple of lenses. So those of you who've worked with us for a while may have kind of heard me referencing almost a system map there when I'm talking about those core processes and those enabling processes. When we get bottlenecks, particularly in those transformation and leadership processes, this can cause a situation of a very particular type where I think Agile, again, it really starts to shine there. And we're going to cover that a little bit later on in this webinar. But just to define what we mean by an improvement bottleneck, we can say it's where our organization is unable to rapidly deploy the improvement efforts it needs, and that would be the simplest explanation. But again, it's better to picture, well, what does this look like? What does this feel like? And yes, by the way, the image there is AI generated. But that's a situation that we encounter a lot. It's where we've got all of these projects, all of these priorities, and they just seem to be in a zero-sum conflict. Too many projects, not enough resource. And therefore, to get any project off the ground seems very difficult, like they're stuck in a queue at the airport waiting for a spot on the runway. And as soon as they get there, it seems like there's just difficulties taking off. We can't agree on the best way to do it. Think about, for example, a manufacturing organization, balancing the need for the normal kind of R&D and product development projects with fixing other systemic issues, the ongoing cost challenges in the organization, not to mention then on top of that, actually reacting to the market. This can cause bottlenecks, particularly where in the modern world, things are changing more rapidly, which is where this concept and this conversation about agility begins. So those are the two types of bottlenecks, the bottlenecks within the work, either our core or enabling processes, and then really specifically those bottlenecks on our improvement and leadership through our strategy journey.
Yeah, interesting angle, and I think it reinforces that point you made on the last slide, that these bottlenecks can be just as pernicious and as serious in our support and enabling processes. Yet we often just think about them in core processes and customer-facing processes, the ones that perhaps get the press coverage or the KPIs are directly linked to. Yet, as you say, Anthony, all organisations are a system of processes. The knock-on effect downstream shouldn't be underestimated, but is difficult to estimate.
Absolutely, and not just are they systems of processes, but as anyone who's worked with PMI will know and be acutely aware of, they're systems of people. And so there's an important bridge in here to this common thread, really, that's underpinning both of those types, but all bottlenecks in general. This idea of overburden. But actually, we can think about this idea of overburden a little bit more precisely, because we could, as you were kind of hinting at there, Rich, we could zero in on those practical, visible bottlenecks that are being caused by, the inputs to the process in terms of, the tools we're using, the machines, the materials, the data we've got, the methods and policies that we're following. But it's always really important to bear in mind that there's this psychological overburden as well that can contribute to this, and that's where we often talk about the hamburger model at PMI. This idea that yes, we want clarity in what we do and how we do it, and in terms of agility is more about dealing with uncertainty with those particular things. But the thing that's going to unite all of these different kind of methodologies and ways of thinking about bottlenecks is the idea that a fundamental and key contributor to that is how people are feeling about that change, the political realities of the situation. And again, when you put that in the context of not just the operational, but particularly those transformational bottlenecks, it really starts to become clear that yes, that's definitely something to consider too.
And so, Anthony, are you trying to claim that throwing tools at it isn't enough? Is that where you're going with this?
Absolutely, Rich. You've seen
Good
straight through me, yeah. And that's going to be a major theme of when we go through these agile tools. As is the case with PMI, yes, there is a tool, but what we're going to dig into today, and I hope you will all find very interesting, is, but what's the value of that tool? What is it that tool is doing that relates back to this concept of bottlenecks, both operational and transformational?
And Anthony, just before you jump on to the next slide, I haven't seen this diagram used in PMI Live for a while. So over on the left, where you've got the people, materials, machines, method, and environment, that diagram has been around for a very long time. And often people ask, why are those lines not straight? Because you go straight from people, you feed them in through a process. And it's very deliberate design, because in reality, things are messy. It is indirect. It isn't necessarily a straight line between these connections. And the reason we've always expressed that diagrammatical representation like that is to give an idea of that and to reflect the reality that don't assume it's just A to B.
Yeah, absolutely. The inputs to our processes are our sources of variation, but also our sources of insight. And that's how we have to treat them, not as these fixed parameters that we can rely on in a very one-to-one way. Yeah,
great, thank you.
And so there's a couple of things then that we'd want to, just thinking about the idea of the process itself, there's a couple of things that before we dive into the detail on the bottlenecks, we just want to pick this idea apart of the idea of a constraint versus a bottleneck. So, as I said earlier, these bottlenecks, whether they're operational or transformational, they can either be short-term or long-term. They can be a thing that happens at a point in time and then we're able to resolve. They could be recurring, or they could just be, persistent for extended periods of time. But what's key is that the bottlenecks, what they're doing is they're revealing to us the constraints of our processes, right? So that could be, as we said, the tools, the technology, how we're structured, how we like to make decisions. It can just be the very culture of the organization, which can be frustrating because that feels ethereal and intangible. But ultimately, yes, that messy people side of things is also there as a constraint. Not to mention things that may even seemingly be out of our control, like, again, demand profile. Mentioned spikes in demand into our processes. Oftentimes, as organizations, in a real sense, we're a victim of those things. as much as anything else. But these constraints, they're generating the bottlenecks. The bottlenecks are revealing the constraint. Therefore, if we want to fix a bottleneck, it's worth saying right up front in this webinar that we're going to have to redesign the process. So we're not going to say anything different than that for the remainder of the agenda today. What we're going to really think about is the concept of operational agility in times when there are bottlenecks and in times when there particularly are uncertainty around what and how to get to a better place in the organization.
Yeah, great.
So with that, we wanted to ask, or I wanted to ask you a question. Be really interested to know, now that we've drawn this kind of distinction between the operational bottlenecks with the work itself and the improvement bottlenecks to launching those improvement efforts. I'd be interested to know for your organization, which type of bottleneck is causing the biggest headache right now? Is it operational? Is it improvement? Is it both? Or interestingly, is it neither? And neither of those really a problem. I don't want to lead the witness, so I'm not going to share my theory. But I'm really interested to know what you all say, and then perhaps if there's a skew in one direction, we can spend more time on one of those topics.
Excellent. Neil, could you launch the poll on screen, please? Excellent. You can see that's live now. It should pop up in the middle of your screen. So the question Anthony is asking is, of those bottlenecks that he's just described, which are causing the biggest headache and the biggest problem in your organization right now? Is it those operational ones, or is it the ones in your improvement efforts? Maybe it's both, or neither are a problem. We're not asking for a measure of kind of seriousness or percentage wise here. We're asking which causes the most problems the most often. Just a gut feel on this. Gives us a feel for the direction of some of the slides that Anthony's going to cover. Should probably answer myself, shouldn't I? There we go.
That's interesting responses. I love seeing them come in real time.
Yeah, indeed. So give you a few more moments to have a think about that and put your responses in. And see where we get to. There has been a Teams update since last month, so we're intrigued to see how some of the refinements of the technology are working today. This certainly looks a little more stable. Is that an improvement? I think so. Okay, so what have we got, Anthony?
It looks like there's a runaway winner, doesn't it? It looks like everyone's saying both, which is, I was going to say, well, that's good because we get to talk about, but I don't want to say it's good that you're experiencing bottlenecks everywhere, guys. Congratulations. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying it's very interesting, first of all, that genuinely both of them. And we've got, as I said, Agile has something to say about each of those areas. So yeah, looking forward to covering both. Thanks everyone for voting.
Interesting. And my theory on this, and I know you asked me earlier on this morning, Anthony, about if I was to answer on our behalf. And certainly within PMI, our biggest issue is the improvement bottlenecks, not the operational bottlenecks. And perhaps that's because we've worked on so many of the operational bottlenecks. But we find we've got so many improvements that the people implementing those improvements often have quite a backlog, and then it causes impatience, etc. In terms of some very careful capacity management is needed in order to address that. So it's interesting to see this today.
Well, let's dive in then. Let's have a think about, first of all, the operational ones, and then we'll come back to the improvement bottlenecks, and really just start at a very high level, thinking about the general relationship between Agile as a methodology and bottlenecks themselves. And I think there's three places at the highest level that this happens. And that's what we'll then break down for the rest of the webinar. Thinking back to the Agile Manifesto, there's a often quoted line in there saying that we value responding to change over following a plan. And that's a very interesting kind of behavioral realization. And you could talk about just that subject for a while, but very clearly you can see a link between that and the alleviation of a bottleneck. Bottlenecks being systemic due to plans, policies, things that have been in place, things that may have served a purpose and been a good theory at some point in time, but actually are they holding up that operational agility? And then the idea of iteration, it's one of the things that I think, again, at the highest level, Agile is most famous for. This idea of valuing frequent increments of value, getting fast feedback, and really crucially having a retrospective element. And when you add all of this together, you're basically creating an environment that's kind of bottleneck repellent. It is almost by design constantly self-examining, self-reflecting, self-improving, and prioritizing and delivering value as quickly as it possibly could. So when you look at it in that sense, yes, there's a very direct link. And then finally, organizationally, Agile has this idea of smaller teams, very capable teams who are given autonomy, they're given the tools and the remit, and importantly, a framework to operate safely in. So that's the high level explanation. For most of the rest of this discussion, we'll be diving into those concepts in detail and talking about how specifically they can apply. However, before we do that, it's really worth thinking about that point we made earlier about, well, what is the point of a tool? And I think Spotify as an organization have a great example of this, because for these three things that you're seeing on screen, these three concepts we're discussing, Spotify are often given as, the example of one of the organizations who've really landed that concept and taken it as far as it can go. And it's true that they saw really big gains in the speed at which they could deliver and the quality that they were delivering. But what I find very interesting about Agile in Spotify is that while they started with a very much traditional Agile Scrum methodology, quite quickly they evolved it, and they literally talk about throwing away the parts that just didn't quite suit their culture, their organization, and bringing other things in that drove the same behaviors, but in a way that worked for that organization.
And nail right on the head there, isn't it, Anthony? Because sometimes you get an interpretation of some of these things that it must be implemented in this way or else. But fundamentally, pragmatism is one of the greatest strengths of an improvement practitioner. Couple that with knowledge, and you stand a chance of success.
Absolutely. And so if you were to go there and ask questions looking for, marking their Agile homework, there'd be things that they wouldn't show you. They would show you other things. To really make this come alive, something that a lot of our people who've interacted with us before would be familiar with is just the idea of a process flowchart as a tool. If you ask someone, well, what's the purpose of a process flowchart? They'll give you all sorts of answers like, it gives us one clear way of doing things. It helps me to train people. I can show them the map. It helps me pass an audit. And I think all of those things are true, but I don't think that they are the true value of the flowchart. I think the real value of the flowchart is the behavioral change that it generates. So think about behavior A without a process flowchart, someone who isn't willing to take that time to pull the team together and to systematically and thoroughly discuss the process and quality concerns around the process. Well, when does that happen? Well, oftentimes when you're coaching green belts, you do find that happens. Someone picks up a project, an idea in the organization, and they see that their first step is to go away and hold this process mapping workshop. And their reaction is, I don't really want to pull the team together. We know the process. I know the process. I'll just write it down at my desk and I'll show it to them in a brief meeting, and then I can take it back and that means that we've mapped the process. And then we can get on to talking about solutions. Mm-hmm. And the problem is that oftentimes those folks then can't see a way forward to a solution. And the root cause is because you've not learned about the process. You haven't actually learned what's going on. So behavior B with the flowchart is pushing someone to see the process through fresh eyes, pushing someone to interact with a wide range of process operators, pushing them to observe and learn and therefore improve. And this concept that the value of the flowchart is its ability to generate that behavioral difference can and should be applied to tools like these, the ones that we frequently encounter in the Agile Operational Leadership box, right? And I just want to pick 4 of them and go through them very quickly to give examples. The first one that I wanted to talk about is the idea in Agile of cross-functionality. Whether you're following the Scrum framework or whether you're at Spotify in what they like to call tribes and squads, what you're in is a small and dynamic group of motivated people who have different skill sets, but when you add all of their skill sets together, we're confident that it's everything required to deliver something. And what that means isn't just carefully picking teams based on skills. It means shifting the mindsets of those teams such that well, that's not my job, not going to get involved mindset goes away. And it's just a squad of people, a scrum team of people who are dedicated to adding this piece of value for the customer, to executing this step of the process. Right. And that behavioral shift, you could see, could be super helpful in removing bottlenecks around an organization. Similar concept with one of the more famous elements of, or well-known elements of Agile, the idea of time-boxed sprints. If we ask ourselves again, what's the behavioral change that creates? Well, I think there's several. One I'd like to think about is the behavior of committing to and then focusing on delivering the right amount of value next. And when you put it in those terms, again, that's fairly straightforward. That's what we're doing with a sprint. We're committing to delivering the right piece of value next. And then we're having that retrospective, as I mentioned earlier, that looks back at how we did that and effectively it looks at continually improving it. So, Rich, I can see you've got your hand up.
Yeah, I've got a question come in, Anthony, just on one of the live stream chats. I've always thought that this Agile stuff was all about IT. Is that not correct?
It's not correct, but it's an understandable observation. Rich, you and I had a conversation about this in preparation for today, and I'm glad it's come up. I likened this to the statement that does lean just work in manufacturing? And I think, well, no, it's not that lean only works in manufacturing. I think when we say these things, what we mean is the concepts of lean are most visually obvious and understandable when observed in a physical manufacturing environment. But those concepts don't evaporate once you change the signage on the building from, manufacturer incorporated to the bank. Those concepts, those same laws of physics are applying. So just because transportation is dead obvious when you're physically watching someone move a bucket of bolts around, it should become just as obvious that your staff are transporting data around the organization through 9 different systems and screens. Right, so the concept applies. And I think it's the same with agility. As we're saying, each of these behaviors that these tools are designed to generate apply and generalize everywhere. It's just that the need for them and the structure of them in this way is best observed often in an IT environment.
Yeah, and I guess there's something about, I'd add to that, there's something about the origin of it as well. I mean, absolutely, the big label appeared connected to IT, which, I have a personal preference. I think agility is much more powerful, actually. I mean, whilst Agile is the recognized label, agility, for me, resonates better and is more indicative of what's needed, what's required as an outcome.
Yeah, absolutely. We discussed this on previous PMI lives, but my favorite, easiest to remember kind of definition of what do we mean by agile is just systematic reduction of uncertainty, which we'll come on to a little bit later. But again, when you put it into those terms, that's what we mean by agility. It's the behaviors that allow us to do that. Coming back to this then, so the couple of other tools that people might be familiar with. In Agile, we have the idea of Kanban. And most people, I think, these days are familiar with what that looks like, having these tiles that we're moving that represent the flow of work. And again, asking ourselves, what's the behavioral change? Well, now it starts to become quite obvious. The behaviors are becoming transparent. It's visual management. It's managing by exception. It's having a central place of conversation about the work. And you start to realize, well, none of that's necessarily new. None of it's super technical or scary. But actually, what Agile is giving us is a pre-packaged, engaging way to do this that teams will be able to adopt and share easily with this language game that we call Kanban. And the same for retrospectives, as I mentioned earlier, that ability to look back and continuously improve how we've delivered value to the customer. If you're an operations leader and you want to get and you want to instill continuous improvement culture into your team, well, what better mechanism than having that retrospective approach where the team is at a known point in time reflecting back and discussing how it could be better.
Okay, great.
So look, I mean, none of this is necessarily new. in terms of removing bottlenecks from our operations, that's going to require process redesign, and we have a good approach for that. We would follow the improvement cycle to make those changes, and we can iterate within that. We can be agile and show agility within the improvement cycle. But fundamentally, when we talk about backlogs, often we'll talk about having good capacity management, good short interval control, good daily huddles, visual management. Agile is new but necessary. It's new in the sense that it's new language, new tools. It's necessary in the sense that those tools have been tuned to work in areas of uncertainty, particularly around what you're delivering and how. But again, the behaviors they will drive will have strong links and strong echoes to process excellence approaches that we're familiar with. That shouldn't be a surprise, and I don't think that necessarily detracts from Agile as a way of thinking and orienting yourself.
Okay, excellent. Anthony, just while you've got a natural pause there, I had a question in for a reminder of how to get the translations. So if you would like to watch the session and you're in the live session in another language, either with captions or live voice translation, simply go to More at the top, and then you've got Language and Speech, and you can choose captions, or you can turn on RTT, which is real-time translation.
Okay. So that ends our section on operational bottlenecks. I want to focus in then on the idea of improvement bottlenecks and Agile. And these improvement bottlenecks, I think where they're coming from is this concept certainly we talk about this in Agile, of VUCA, of volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. But to make that come alive, let's just think for a moment about prioritizing and understanding what improvement efforts we would want to make today as an organization. Now, everyone in the audience there, everyone on the call today is from a different industry, potentially wildly different challenges, but we're all facing things like, AI. How are we as an organization going to react to that? Literally world-changing technology evolving around us as we wake up every morning. And also physicalized autonomy, right? We're starting to see self-driving vehicles. We're starting to see physical robotic machinery that's capable of doing things like site inspections and repair and maintenance, surgeries, all sorts of applications are just becoming more and more integrated with that type of technology. But even on top of that, just the general volatility in the marketplace because of geopolitics, prices, supply chains, the shift to renewables, all of this is causing symptoms. And those symptoms are, we have lots of competing projects and everything is a priority. Therefore, nothing's a priority. It's really hard to align stakeholders and get them to agree, well, which project gets that resource now, which gets that priority, creates competition. And ultimately, it just means projects really struggle to get off the ground. And by the time they do, maybe things have changed. Back to this idea of the volatility, the uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity that's more inherent in the world. So where this leads us is that uncertainty is driving the improvement bottleneck. This is why I think Agile and this improvement bottleneck are so well related. Because if you think, for example, about, just take the first example I used on the previous slide of artificial intelligence. Most organizations right now are looking probably at AI and saying, well, we need to react. There's benefits to be had. Surely there are things to be done in this space. But right off the bat, it's really hard to get a project started because yes, AI is a big deal, but there's so much noise and confusion about it that different stakeholders are going to think differently about it. People are going to be very cautious and want lots of analysis done before they dare pull the trigger. And even if you can solve those problems, then you have to figure out, well, what are you actually going to try and achieve with that AI? That's its own question entirely. Is it achievable? And then getting on to, well, how are we going to do something about this? Well, how are you going to test AI? The way you test this system might be very different. It's uncertain. You don't know. It seems like the only option is to be stuck in analysis paralysis unless we find a way to reduce that uncertainty systematically. And I think here is where if there is a magic trick in Agile, and I don't think it's that magic necessarily, but here's where the sleight of hand happens. I think fundamentally, in order to systematically reduce the uncertainty, what agility would have us do is change the question. So instead of asking the question, how and where should we, as our organization, whether we're in the medical field, the insurance field, the manufacturing, aerospace, how and where should we implement AI? Well, the problem with that is the answer could be, well, give us 2 months to do some analysis and we'll tell you, leadership team. And you'll inevitably challenge that, and you'll want a new PowerPoint deck in a slightly different shape with better numbers here and worse numbers there and more options here. Okay, and that will take another 2 months. And by the time we've done that, as we said, everything's changed. So the sleight of hand is, let's change the question. What's the fastest way for our organization to learn more about AI? Well, it's not to do 2 months of research. It's probably to start experimenting in a safe way with the tools that are available and share the learnings as rapidly as possible. That's the core concept. And again, there's nothing magical about that. But what we do get from the Agile framework, if we do training, if you do an apprenticeship, you get given this beautiful tool set and this language that you can use to orient a small team about a task and begin to systematically reduce the uncertainty with safeguards around you. Okay, so as a product owner with clear accountability, leading this development effort with backed up with tools to manage and mitigate the risk, to prioritize the work appropriately, to promote innovative design thinking in this area of uncertainty, and then to have this cross-functional team of developers with them. And again, developers, it can sound very IT heavy. A developer could be someone from HR helping you develop a new policy, right? It could be anyone. But the point is, we have everyone we need to run a successful experiment, and the definition of the successful experiment is one that learns and shares the learnings rapidly. So that's really where Agile comes in and starts to shine. I think it's in this transformation space when we're looking at those improvement bottlenecks.
Great. We've got an observation come in. Well, it's kind of observation / thanks for focusing so much on the psychology and mindset needed to make Agile work. That's from a regular from Hoylake who's joining us. Thanks for the comment.
Thank you very much. I think, yeah, it's super important with Agile that we do keep that in mind, that this isn't just a set of meetings and ceremonies to attend. It's a whole different way of thinking and approaching problems. And on that point of uncertainty, I did want to finish this section by asking another question. Now that we've talked about uncertainty as a driver of improvement bottlenecks, I'd be interested to know from yourselves, if you think about the different improvement efforts or projects that either you're deploying in your organizations or you would like to deploy in your organizations, what proportion of them do you think suffer from this concept we've been talking of uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity? Is it all or most of them? Maybe half, the minority, or none? I'd be interested to know, because it often isn't all. Right, there are projects out there where actually the uncertainty is fairly low. What we need to do is plan effectively and manage effectively. So yeah, very interested to see feelings on that.
Okay, great. Let's get that on screen, please, Neil. So again, question Anthony's asking is, in your organization, of the improvement efforts, usually called projects, would you like to deploy in your organization? What proportion of them suffer from this concept of uncertainty that Anthony's been talking about? Okay, I can see responses starting to come in. Always good.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Again, it looks like another, I don't want to give it away yet, but another really runaway leader. And I think this is a really important question, because once we have the answer to this question, which it looks like we do have a bit of a runaway winner. Are you happy for me to say it, Rich?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I was just pondering there, and people have already started, I can see. It'd be really helpful if you've got a comment or observation on your answer, just pop it in the chat. Give us a bit of explanation. Why have you said that? How does that manifest itself? Really interested in that. Because it's not what I was expecting. So Anthony, sorry, back to you.
Do you know, I think that's a very fair response. So the majority is saying maybe half of them. The next most popular selection is all or most of them. But I would imagine that if we were to then do another poll that says, okay, if you said all or most, would you say all or most? I bet most people would say most. I think what we're seeing here, Rich, is an appreciation, as I said, that not all projects fit into this bucket. It's making me think about an organization I used to be in, where we were looking at projects like reacting to government regulation, where there was uncertainty about what the government would do, being balanced against projects like, well, we need to change those servers over there. We need to replace them because they're aging. We know when they go out of date. We know what we're going to replace them with. We know what wires to buy. We just need to, marshal the troops to do it.
No, it's fair enough. So we've got, well, I guess you're more of a less of a skeptic than me, I suppose, in life. That's not a bad thing. So commentaries are coming in. We've got competing projects increase in recent years due to budget and staffing cuts. Even an implementation project has uncertainty, indeed risk identification to try and minimize uncertainty, but still there, and there is always some. Uncertainty increases with dependencies on our tech teams, or external parties. I can see one of our tech team off screen here shaking his head furiously that that's not the case, yet things suggest otherwise.
Yeah. Well, and it's when you frame it as, in organizations who don't explicitly deal in technology, those few resources they have who have that competency quickly become a bottleneck in a world where that's how everything runs. And it makes you think again about that. Well, how are we organized then? How do we do that? How do we remove that bottleneck? How do we redesign those IT processes? Yeah.
Yeah, cool. Excellent. Thank you.
Very good. So, moving on to the next piece then, I just wanted to close then with something very specific on this transformational bottlenecks. Just to pull out an observation from myself that oftentimes the most acute cause can be just decision making itself, right? Just the ability to decision make. So I just wanted to call out 3 things about the agile mindset that again really help with these bottlenecks, particularly in transformation. The first is having an empowered product owner. But what we really mean by that is decentralized decision authority. Instead of having the decision made by the committee up here, more rapid decisions are made by those closer to the work, but with faster feedback and therefore greater confidence to those whom they're reporting back to. And that systemic view. The other thing that's really great about Agile, if you ever do any of the training, is some of the tools in there for generating rapid consensus. I have a really fond memory of scoping out a CRM program, a deployment of a CRM, and playing prioritization poker. I thought it was a really wonderful way of generating rapid consensus that actually did quite a robust job of prioritizing the right things. Again, won't cover it today, but if you're interested, it's a fantastic way of doing it. And there are others in the Agile toolkit. And again, talked about time boxes already, but I just wanted to call out the connection between having time boxed work and increasing decision-making cadence, just as a specific call out. I think that's super important, and it sometimes goes unlooked as one of the benefits of having this iterative sprint framework. It's not just about building something faster, it's about deciding faster. And I think that's super important if you want to remove transformational bottlenecks.
And it's often ignored, that element of the decision making. We not so much as a retrospect, it took us too long to decide is a common narrative that I come across, but recognition that's one of the objectives is to make these decisions faster and tackle this uncertainty issue so you can make reliable decisions. It's a key deliverable here.
Yeah, absolutely. So so what does that leave us with? It leaves us with this world where, yes, there is still a road to sprint one. There's, anyone who's worked on an Agile project will back me up on this. It's not that Agile just lets you grab all of the machines and start building. What Agile does is it gives you the structured way to get to sprint one, call it the road to sprint one. But then what we're looking for is to just maximize the speed at which we can drive out learnings, drive out deliverables, remove those transformational bottlenecks. So to summarize, hope that's been helpful. Agility, it's helping us adopt behaviors. That's what agility is doing. Those tools are helping us adopt behaviors, and those behaviors help us with the bottlenecks. Therefore, an agile operations leader will benefit from using those tools as a mechanism to embed those behaviors. Agile approaches are super powerful, as we've seen, on transformational bottlenecks, and particularly where we are dealing with that uncertainty over what and how. But the fundamental message, the key takeaway, is that all of this must be underpinned by people who are willing to work a different way with each other and approach the situation a different way. So it's all about changing that the compass needle of the organizational culture, and that isn't a quick journey. It's not as simple as telling everyone what a Scrum team is.
Yeah, excellent. Hey, you got a few observations coming in here, Anthony. Listening to this webinar, I feel like my organization has decision paralysis, whereby it takes forever for a decision to be made. Common in your practice?
Yeah, and experience. Because they're big decisions and they should be weighed up effectively. Again, what's often missing for those folks who are struggling to make those decisions is the ability to see that better way of doing things, to be able to see a structure beneath them that's primed and ready to go away and give them that rapid learning. And I think we have to approach both sides. Oftentimes, this implementation of Agile will go wrong for this reason, Rich, where we over focus on just training some Scrum teams in the organization or just talking to the leadership. We have to have both working to change that.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Excellent. Okay, thank you very much, Anthony. If you could jump to the next slide for me, that would be great. You heard Anthony earlier on talk about some of our apprenticeship programs, and I can see we've got quite a few apprentices, active apprentices with us. You're very welcome. Great to have you with us, building up the OTJ there. We've got a brand new standard, two brand new standards actually that are launching this in September. This is one of them, 2 new cohorts. So the Agile Operations Leader Apprenticeship is for what I describe as the accidental manager, the team leader, the person that's succeeded because they were good at as a process operator and haven't necessarily been formally trained. This is a comprehensive program. We're really excited to be launching it. And it's got some of our agile content and certification in it too, which is even more exciting. If you want to attend any of the advice sessions, they run every Tuesday and Thursday. You can find out more with that QR code that's on screen. And finally from us, just a couple of other points. We've got a really exciting drum roll. Perhaps I should have done this first. You could jump on 2 slides for me, please, Anthony. Yeah, not off the hook yet. So we're really delighted to be announcing that also from September, there's a brand new way to become a certified green belt with PMI and to join the cohorts of many tens of thousands out there who have already done so over the years. And it's our live virtual boot camp. This is available for our public training program, which runs every single month of the year with now it's 5 days virtual classroom content led by a consultant such as Anthony. And then you can, it's then supported by some on-demand e-learning material and the exams included. Neil's about to pop into the chat the link to the Greenbelt page. That's been fully updated with all the details of the programme. And as you can see, when you have a glance through there, down the bottom, you've got the dates available every month starting in September. We are very excited by that. Again, that's come through feedback and voice of the customer that we've reshaped that program to enable you to become a green belt faster and cheaper, frankly, with the brand new pricing that is on there for the public course programs. If you do have any questions about that, reach out. You may have gathered we love to talk. Earlier on, I mentioned the Knowledge Hub. This month's latest releases, we've got an interview with Anu Kalia from Tesco, one of the UK's largest supermarkets. That's in our Leading for Business Excellence podcast series. It's available as a vodcast and a podcast. You can subscribe on all the major podcast platforms. Really intriguing. And what I think for me, what I took away from that was the enthusiasm that had been generated in that team. Really, really interesting, and some interesting thoughts and perspectives on that. Then we've got in our tools sections, in our tool podcasts, you've got Uncommon Sense. When 8D is the right, when is 8D the right problem-solving approach? With our colleague Stuart Gibson leading that. Looks like he's playing with that 8, remanufacturing that 8 there. I'm not sure what he's doing to the poor 8. And then finally, we've got a white paper on Beyond the Dashboard, rethinking KPIs for strategic impact. And you're probably gathering from this, the Knowledge Hub is wide, it is varied, and it's there for you. So do find it at pmi.co.uk. And very finally, what have we got coming up next month? Is it you again, Anthony? The AI ready practitioner, I think it might be. Skills you need for the next 12 months. We have been at the forefront of AI development in the improvement industry. Our ears and eyes are fully open. And as ever with us, it's about practicality. So how can this benefit you? How can this benefit your organizations in the improvement setting? Don't miss it. It's with Anthony on Friday, the 29th of August, 1500 UK time. Again, registrations are open. Or, of course, you can join us on our live streams on LinkedIn, on YouTube, or Facebook. On that note, thank you so much for joining us, folks. It is our pleasure and our privilege to deliver these to you every month. Great having you with us. Thanks for the participation. Thanks for keeping us on our toes with your observations and questions. It's great to have you with us. Thanks very much.